Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Essentially this is going to be one of the first few videos I make, and I think it gets up to the real heart of why I'm making this or why I'm making any videos, and it's to help essentially bring out this idea that through prayer, through meditation, it's the only way you can find true happiness, an internal sense of peace and contentment that you kind of can't get from chasing things in the external world. I think we all understand that praying or meditating in some shape or form is obviously very helpful to us. There's every study that says it helps decrease stress, helps improve concentration, helps decrease blood pressure, and so on and so forth. The benefits are endless. It's like non-stop in academic circles. We know this for the most part. But I want to give you a more bigger picture as to why you should pray, as to why you should meditate. And essentially this might be a bit of a whirlwind. And also take what I say with a grain of salt. This is essentially what I've come to understand. It's for the most part I'm just like taking other people's ideas and paraphrasing, and I don't have any extensive practice either, but regardless, I'm just going to tell you how I see things. So I think we have to importantly start from a place of understanding ourselves or who we are, and essentially where did identity come from. So again, hard to argue this, but in academic circles, evolution is a quite agreed upon thing. That's fine. It doesn't necessarily even negate a religious view. Evolution could be something God used to create beings who they could have relationships with. Regardless, we have evolution, and essentially you have a body, a flesh, so on, a brain, and it's like, okay, I'm going to create an identity for this body. So we're just going to use my example, Mark. You are now Mark, okay? You take care of this body, because if you don't, you'll get hurt, and if you do take care of it, you might get some benefits, some pleasures, some bonuses. So you run towards food, sex, for reproduction. It's good to get more marks. We might improve on the mark software later, and run away from things. You don't want to see that scary tiger, you're heading the next direction because you don't want to get eaten. And essentially, now your identity is formed. Over time, it gets more robust. You have a cognition and so on. Now you have this complex ability of relating ideas and so on. But regardless, now you're the self who runs towards things and has cravings, and essentially have aversions from things, runaways from things. And that creates fear and anxiety. And again, think about it. This is very useful for us because now we can plan for the future. Now we have an identity across time that protects our body. So we can plan for the future. Oh, I need to get food for later. Or, for example, oh, I made a mistake before, therefore I have to make sure I don't do that wrong. But this, in our modern culture, translated to a lot of neuroticism. Oh no, I'm worried about what could happen later on. Or, oh no, I did so badly in this social interaction or on this test, I shouldn't do that, I hate myself, whatever. And essentially it has this narrative structure that can be quite harmful. And even when it is positive, like daydreaming about things, it's still not what you want. It's still getting you further away from the moment, from God, from peace, and so on. Because again, your identity is playing this game of running in circles and usually saying, oh, if I just get that, I'll be happier. If I just buy this, I'll be happier. If I just get this job, if I get this partner, if I do this, if I do that, I'll be happier. No, it's not like that. You don't get happiness from running around trying to get stuff. You might get some fulfillment from helping people and so on, but that's not the same point, and I will potentially talk about that more in a different video. But for the most part, you're chasing around the world, looking for the experience, looking for the thing that's going to fulfill you, and you can't find it externally, at least not to the extent of happiness or contentment that I'm talking about. So, explain to me so now we have the self. What do I do? Okay, so now you pray and meditate. Why? So essentially the goal of these practices, praying and meditation, is to lessen our sense of self. It's to decrease ourselves and, if you like using this language, increase the presence of God in our moment, in our lives, and so on. And this ends up translating into decreasing the sense of a subjective self, a subjective worldview, and making our worldview more objective. Okay? So it's because essentially we have this mechanism or identity which filters the world, in which we create objects, and the objects aren't inherently a property of the world. Identity is what helps us categorize things so that we can have relationships between ideas, and so on and so forth, and progress and make sense of our world. But from a more objective view, there is none of that. And essentially, we can bring this back down to a brain region called the default mode network, and essentially where identity resides. And these practices help break this stuff down. Helps decrease the workings of the default mode network, and essentially, this is a big idea in cognitive science fields. Okay, so I understand. I have the sense of self, and I'm supposed to pray and meditate to help me decrease it. But why? I don't see it. And that's very reasonable because I never saw it my whole life growing up for the most part either. Now I'm going to essentially reference these ideas from one of the books I read, Mind Illuminated. It's a secular take on essentially how your brain works in respect to these concentration practices and so on. And now I need to bring out an idea from that book, which is related to your attention and your awareness. Again, I want to make a series about the things in this book. It's probably another big reason why I made this channel, because of how helpful the book was to me personally. And now I'm going to break down quickly what attention and awareness is. Essentially, when you perceive the world, you are attentive to certain things. And for example, if I pull my hand in front of my face, I can be attentive to my hand, how it looks like, even my fingerprints. I'm attentive to it. But in the background is my deck, like everything else I see. And that's in my awareness. This is my attention. Attention is a faculty or a component of your awareness. And it's essentially a mechanism you used as part of your identity to help you identify what's relevant to you. You place your attention hopefully in places that are relevant. And again, your phone robs your attention and it's full of distraction, and I'll talk about this in a second. But your goal is to go from less attentive ways of viewing the world and more awareness-focused views of the world. And why am I saying this? It's because attention usually involves your sense of self more strongly, while awareness, again, because of its a relevance mechanism, while awareness has more of an objective view to it. It just is what it is, like, rather than this is important to me, which is what attention does. Awareness just gives the background context. So we're trying to get closer to awareness, closer to objectivity, closer to God through these practices. Okay, sure, I guess that makes sense, but I don't understand how. So different practices do different things. Now I kind of want to help give you a better understanding as to how your brain works, again, using ideas from this book. So this book talks about subminds. There's also an idea in cognitive science called modular mind theory. And there's another book I was reading called Symphony of Selves, and another idea in psychiatry called internal family systems model. Regardless, a lot of these ideas, granted not all saying the same things, are pointing to this idea that you have this predominant self that you're consciously aware of, but then you have these sub-selves or separate selves, which are kind of like smaller. And essentially it's this idea where you're not always who you think you are, in the sense that you can be running around, depending on if you got angry or if something happened to you, you could potentially behave in ways you're not typically behaving. And it's again because you have these different types of selves. Maybe the one that's a bit more deviant, the one that's not. This is overly simplifying the idea, and it's not entirely accurate, but it's not as important. So you have this bigger self, there's separate selves beneath it, then there's something called subminds beneath that. And now this is essentially what you do to operate in the world. You use these subminds. So what are these subminds? They're essentially any basic mental process. There's a submind that knows how to sleep. There's a submind that knows how to make food. There's a submind that knows how to study, a submind that knows why you should exercise instead of eat, or why you should eat something healthy instead of something unhealthy. As you can see, there's thousands of them, and they work for the most basic of processes. Now, okay, I have subminds, and they're the things, in part, that are driving you all across the world, doing whatever you're doing, across your day. You're barely half aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, but these subminds are the ones deciding. The problem is, they're always arguing. They're like, no, we should do this, no, we should do that, and they're all fighting. And that's why there's no cohesion, or sometimes a lack of direction in some of the things you do, or you're just doing things to do them. And this is also potentially what can cause some of your suffering, this lack of unification. So what you do with these practices, meditation, praying, and so on, is essentially give your mind something. You want to become best friends with your mind. You want to train your mind. You want to train these subminds to come on board. You take a big picture view. The subminds are not, they don't have context. They're kind of dumb. They don't know anything. They're just a process. So you take a big picture view and you're like, okay, I want to be happy. How do I be happy? I need to be more present, close relationship to God, but I just don't see it yet. I need to get more of me on board. So actually, I'm just gonna pick something potentially arbitrary, like the breath, or maybe words that are meaningful to me, such as a prayer, and keep saying it over and over and over again, or following it, like the breath, over and over and over again. It's so arbitrary, but I know why I'm doing this. I'm doing it to get concentrated, and I'm doing it to get the subminds on my side. So it might not seem like it's making much sense, but essentially I'll explain with the practice. You're sitting down, let's say you're saying a prayer or following the breath. You get distracted, you're thinking about something. Oh, I should go make food right now. Then you realize, oh no, I got distracted. I should go back to my object of choice, whatever it may be. Good job for coming back to that object, okay? You essentially internally reward yourself for coming back to your object. Every time you get distracted, you do that. And this is the process of getting the subminds on board. with enough time, with enough practice, with good reward mechanisms, you will get enough subminds on board where things will start to change. And essentially, what's going to happen is your mind will start unifying. Everyone's going to be on board because the subminds are like, blah, 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 blah. I want to go sleep. I'm tired. I want to go make food. I want to study. I need to do this. I need to do that. But then you're like, no, no, no. We're going to go back to this object. Good job for going back. Good job. Good job. Good job. Good job. Over enough time, because they're going to come on board, you're going to end up finding this joy in practicing. Because it's going to give you the most pleasure because you get rewarded. You reward yourself. And the subminds understand that they're going to get a reward. And then they reward themselves. And then it's like this ongoing process. And essentially, this is why you get more concentrated than you've ever been before. It's not the type of concentration where you're like, oh, I'm studying, I'm doing well, I have some caffeine in me, I'm feeling good. No, no, no. This is where you get your subconscious on board to help you on this quest of getting concentrated on some things that could potentially be arbitrary. So this in itself makes your mind very pliant and it listens to you. Now you're the boss and it listens to you and it doesn't care because it's getting rewarded. And even though you picked something potentially arbitrary, regardless, you are now concentrated. And again, because of how your brain works, this dopamine that's giving the reward and this concentration that comes from the subminds coming together, which is acetylcholine, causes a lot of plasticity changes in your brain. So over enough time, you get more top-down control. Again, this is a more mechanicalistic explanation, if you prefer that, or to how the plasticity works. And because this is like a heightened level of concentration, the plasticity effects are even stronger. Because at the end of the day, you're still trying to change your structure to help you realize your true nature or God and reality for what it truly is. So now you have the submind idea. And this explains why meditation prayer is essentially the ultimate hobby. When you go around doing things in life, you essentially do it because you either get internally rewarded or you get externally rewarded from validation of others or from the product that you make or so on and so forth. That's why you make music, it's beautiful, art and so on, or whatever hobby you have. But now, when you pray meditate, it ends up replacing it, or could, because you eternally reward yourself and you essentially unify yourself so well that you can go investigating reality with this sharpened mind. Again, meditation can be a place of relaxation, and it is, and it can be used for sleep and so on. But I'm just saying in the bigger picture, you will need to, if you do want to go all the way or further along the path, you will need to get extremely concentrated, more so than you've ever been in your life. But it's not hard. You just keep rewarding yourself and some minds will let you do it. Okay, so now we have this concentrated mind that we're going to use to investigate ourselves and reality. And essentially, we realize that the whole story we got fed is a lie. We aren't Mark. We aren't this identity. We realize that when we track back enough with our now concentrated mind into awareness, we can see on the outside that we can see that the thoughts are coming. Mark's thoughts are arising. And I'm not the thought. And this is also a common idea in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, in which you essentially teach patients, like for example, anxious patients, that you're not your thoughts. And actually they can do it, and insightful patients can make a lot of progress, for example, de-escalating panic attacks and so on. So it's not nothing like odd. It's not nothing that needs a lot of practice. But essentially you can become a witness to your thoughts. Again, the further you go, the more obvious this will be. But regardless, you're no longer sold this narrative of who you are, and you get closer to just being aware and get closer to ending your suffering, essentially. Granted, that is a very far-term goal. And I'll also again explain with the subminds a little bit more. So when you get in sensory information, for example, I see a bird, there's a lot of processing that happens in your sensory submind before it gets presented to you consciously. It goes so far as to say, there's a bird, I see the bird, it is pleasant to see. And then you get fed, Mark is seeing a bird and it is pleasant. When in reality, a sensory submind interprets the image, sends it to a discriminating mind, which identifies this image to be pleasant, and the narrative mind takes that and formulates it into this story of you seeing the bird. When in reality, there's just a bunch of light hitting your photoreceptors. Again, a whole messed up story, but with the practice, you can potentially deconstruct things. Decide what makes something pleasant or unpleasant, what makes it so that I'm seeing something compared to a different sensory modality, what makes it so that I'm the one seeing it, is Mark really the one seeing it, or am I just aware of it, and so on. And essentially, over time, you see through the facade and you decrease your suffering through making realizations and insight through practicing, again, different techniques do different things. And again, I'll make a bunch of videos about that and hopefully deep dive into some of these topics a little bit more cohesively in separate videos when breaking down the Mind Illuminated book. But I also want to leave you with one more idea. And it's this idea that you kind of get therapy through this practice. And this is essentially what helps you break down the barriers of yourself. You sit down long enough, you will resolve a lot of issues, a lot of things that happen to you. Essentially, you'll sit following an object, whatever, and then something's gonna come up in your mind. For example, I cheesed someone, or something cheesed me 2 years ago when I sent a text message. Most trivial, inconsequential thing, but it's bothering you, and you never resolved it. But it comes up in practice, and then you resolve it. It just automatically does, because now you're at this new place, it's been 2 years, like, who cares? Obviously, with more bigger things, there could be like more intense trauma and so on. And again, there is a whole not so bright side to all this, but maybe that's for another video, and it's also when it comes later on. But essentially resolve these problems, decreasing these barriers, and getting you closer to the freedom that you deserve. And it's honestly such a great feeling running through these, at least as the book and other places call them purifications of some sort. And I want to leave it as to this last point again about your attention. And I think that it's not a coincidence, whether or not you may be aware of this, that there is a mental health crisis going on. And I genuinely think it's because of how technology has kind of destroyed our attention mechanisms. Like TikTok is like the epitome of destroying attention. And it's essentially we're no longer sitting by ourselves for long enough time to resolve all these issues that have been over the course of our lives adding on top and top and top and making us a neurotic mess that I was referencing. And there's also no coincidence that in cognitive science, mindfulness and these techniques and this sort of thing is blowing up out of proportion. And again, this is not my theory, as again I said, the majority of this is taken from other people, is that our attention mechanism is getting destroyed, and our excessive amount of stimulation and lack of time resolving things is causing this mental health crisis, likely. Again, one of 1,000 factors, but it's just an idea from a more cognitive science lens as to what may be happening and with this whole path more broadly. Okay, so that summarizes the video. Again, a bit messy. Hopefully the videos will not be this long in the future. It will be more concise, will be more understandable, be more digestible, and ideally be more practical. I don't want to go into the wishy-washy details of theory and philosophy and so on. I want to give you the practical how to do it, because that's kind of how I psychologically operate. I want to know the instructions. Sure, give me a quick why, and then that's it. And maybe this wasn't the quickest thing, but I hope you found it interesting. Maybe encouraging you to pray, meditate, maybe also encourage you to watch the things I'm going to come out with that help maybe give more structure and guidance. Probably do a video about the benefits, a video about what's the practice look basically, maybe a video about some side practices, and then lastly, the series of the book. And hopefully, of course, other things related to well-being and so on. Thank you, everyone. Love you.